something that I normally talk about when I'm giving tours at the African Art Museum here. I refer back to Sigmund Freud and his protege, Carl Jung. And as you know, Carl Jung was kind of like our modern day psychoanalyst. He brought in the discipline of psychoanalysis. But the reason why I mentioned that with regards to your observations about the difference between humans and other animals in the context of self-serving versus collective serving is that when Jung took a trip to Eastern Kenya and Tanzania, he noticed that the people all took care of themselves and they all had a certain prescriptive functional role as mother, father, chief, children. They all support each other based upon their strengths and also supported each other based upon others' weaknesses countered with their strengths. This concept of community is well known in many African circles as Ubuntu, which is translated roughly into humanity, or you are because I am. Now, the reason why I brought Carl Jung into this discussion is because after this trip of looking at primitive cultures, he changed the whole definition of Freud's libido from sexual energy to community energy, or what we know or what they know, I'm not a psychoanalyst, but what,
no, you're
what
good.
Psychoanalysts know as collective unconsciousness. And collective unconsciousness is a real fancy way of saying that we will all take care of each other in our respective communities, because not necessarily because it's something that we want to do, but because it's our duty to do.
Yeah.
And I just find that very, very, very insightful. And with respect to, I can't speak of all communities in the United States, but in poor Black communities, we do not take care of each other the way we do. As a matter of fact, it's just the opposite. We shoot and kill each other. Not all of us, but some of us, and is normally rooted in domestic violence. And so we have to retrain our minds to say, you know, we have a duty to take care of each other. We have a duty to love each other. We have a duty to be the best that we can be for each other, for our children especially.
Welcome to season 3, episode 13 with my friend Joe Green, as we sit down and talk about do unto others as you would want done unto you. Our conversation is so vast, it is so rich, and it is so delicious. So pull up a chair, grab that coffee and cannoli, because here we go. I want to say good morning, Joe Green, or good afternoon, coming from Washington, D.C. You are a longtime childhood friend that we attended Wayland Academy in Beaver Dam, Wisconsin. And you've been so kind to give me your time to have a conversation over many things organically. I didn't submit any questions to you, just asked you if you'd be interested in being a part of my podcast. And you very kindly said yes. So thank you.
It's a pleasure. And it's good to see you. Also, I wish we could see each other in person, but this is the best we can do in the 21st century.
I know, but that's the beautiful thing, is at least we can, you know. I think it's a really interesting thing and a great way to open up, because I think that what's so fascinating over these last 3 years with us dealing with the pandemic and, you know, technically being past it, but I won't get into the politics of the medicine of that. But the beautiful thing is that we do have this technology. And for those of us who were willing to step and cross that bridge, actually gave ourselves the opportunity to do more of this. And some were forced to have to do this, and others went, oh no, I'm not doing that. That's not my life. That's not my world. And that was a decision and a choice for many. And you either sank or swam with that.
Yes.
And I personally think for those who did not choose to expand, like it or not, kicking or screaming, did themselves a huge disservice. Because I think it's opened many great opportunities and doors and avenues. And especially for people who look at, there's generations of people who are being raised with technology and they don't know how to have a conversation, ironically.
What a paradox we're living in.
It's a huge paradox. And yet, ironically, the reason why I wanted to do this platform 8, 9 years ago before podcasts had even begun to take off was because I love people. I love conversations. I love breaking bread with others and hearing about what makes them tick, what their life stories are. And when I met my producers, Katie and Melissa, whom I've ironically also never met in person, also on the East Coast,
Yes.
they said to me, of all people, you need to have a podcast for this very reason. And if it weren't for this technology, we wouldn't be able to have this beautiful connection where we can sit around the campfire and have an organic, authentic conversation. So I'm grateful.
It's good to see you, Felicia. As a footnote, as you were talking, I saw your little dog. He has a little outfit on, a red outfit.
We have 4 dogs, 2 cats, and a turtle that we didn't even know was here at our house when we bought our house. Nobody decided that they were going to just announce that we were gifted a turtle who we've now had for over 19 years. We have no idea how old he is. And Cubby, who you just saw, we had actually adopted during the pandemic. At the time of his adoption, he was referred to as the 10-year-old toothless terrier from Tijuana. And there's a book right there. And so I think he's been like a therapy dog to my husband, because a couple years prior, we had lost a fraternal twin dog of ours, the male of the two, of male and female. And it really broke my husband's heart, as it breaks my heart as well. But I found that he was having a little bit more challenging time recovering from that loss. And when this dog Cubby was presented, I was like, I've never even had a small dog. I'm like a big dog girl, like how much bigger can we get him, you know, like,
yeah.
And so he's been a great addition to our family. So yeah, he's got his little heart sweater on because God forbid he doesn't get treated like a prince.
Okay. How's the weather there in Los Angeles?
So the beautiful thing is it's now starting to get sunny.
Okay.
We've had a lot of rain, a lot of snow. And it's gotten really muddy and all the things, and, you know, caused people, you know, we've been really, really lucky. But it's funny because environmentally, I'm all about like conservation and how can you give back to the land and all that. And so we're actually in the process of putting in turf today in our entire yard. We've invested in our entire yard after many, many years of exploration and evolution of different designs and all the things. And I finally just put my foot down and said, after the gophers, after the droughts, after the puppies destroying the yard, I want to put in something that will last a long time, look beautiful, be a great investment, and cut down on water and add to the beautification and property value. How about you guys? What's weather like there?
Yeah, so DC has been in the 50s and the 60s as a high all week. And in the lows, I would say from the low to mid 30s. So we're having seasonable weather. I would say, I was watching the news last night, and the weatherman says every 7 to 9 days, this time of the year it rains, and they've been pretty accurate on that, or else our weather patterns have been pretty accurate to that. You know, I'm from Chicago. I think you and family are originally from Rockford. And so March, I'm conditioned to believe that you can get anything in March: hurricane, rainstorm, snowstorm, blizzard, anything. So I've been living here since 2008, or rather, yeah, 2008, and it's been pretty mild, I mean, relatively speaking. So I'm happy with it. As a matter of fact, this winter season, we have had less than a quarter inch of snow, which is unbelievable. I think there's only one other season where well, no, actually, this is the season we've had the least snow since I've been here. So, that's just the way it is. We have our pundits and we have our meteorologists, our scientists, our climate changers, our journalists, all debating the pros and cons of what this means and what the realities are, and whether or not these weather patterns are normal or abnormally normal or normally abnormal. I just go with it.
Well, it's funny because it is true. The East Coast has gotten far less of a harsh winter than the West Coast has,
Yeah,
especially in California and the
yeah,
Northwest. And everybody's scratching their head going, what's going on? I mean, not that you wouldn't expect it in Northern California or the Northwest per se, or even the Inland Empire with the mountains, of course, you would expect that. It's been the oversaturated amounts. You guys have gotten the minimal inches, and like Tahoe, the Sierra
yeah.
mountains have gotten like over 50 feet, I think.
Yes,
Like
many feet. I can't
insane.
even count. Yes.
It's really insane. But hopefully everybody's managing and enduring and getting through, and knock wood, because Mother Nature at her best is definitely, will test you at every
Yeah.
turn. And who knows if this is climate change, and who knows what all we are living through. And, we came up through a 4-season kind of experience childhood, and living in California now over half my life. People are like, oh, you guys don't have seasons. And I'm like, no, actually, that's not true. We actually do have seasons. We have multiple seasons. And, and relative to what we were just talking about, not every situation is guaranteed that every February or every January, February, March is going to be a rainy change of seasons. And then, come spring, summer, it's going to turn into more of that desert climate. But we have a very Mediterranean, very equal to what I think in Italy, Spain, the southern part of Europe kind of experience is, which for me, if it's alignment with soul, it's my perfect alignment. Even though I grew up as a cheesehead flatlander kind of a girl,
Yeah.
with lots of farmland and flatland and whatever. And I have a natural draw to places like Sweden and things of that nature. My truth is, when I landed in Rome and then I came back to LA, I was like, oh my God, I've been living in the 7 hills of Rome all this time, minus the ruins. I had no idea. And this makes perfect sense. And it
Yes.
makes perfect sense who ends up, though multicultural, it makes sense how certain cultures have a natural proclivity to move to places like Southern California. It's
Yeah.
not just the rich and the famous. It's people who this kind of a nature of climate is what their soul aligns with, consciously or unconsciously. And I can honestly say, this is truly like how my soul resonates. I love all weather, but this is like looking out my window and seeing huge trees and mountains and greenery most of the year, with the rain or not, is my jam.
Yeah.
I'm a nature girl by heart. So I want to say you look very handsome.
With all
Life
this
looks
gray
very
hair.
good on you.
Thank you very much. Thank you
You're
very much.
welcome.
I was at our local rec center right down the street. It's about a half block down. And I think I told you and your sister that I normally, spend my mornings doing my runs and exercises and everything. And so about a week and a half ago, one of the rec managers caught me and said, Brother Green, I see you out here every morning. What are you doing on Thursdays at 11 o'clock? And I said, well, I work from home. I telework, but what's going on? He says, well, we have a senior citizen meeting every Thursday. And we like to see if you would join. And I think I'm only 58, and I guess it all depends, what is considered a senior citizen, over 50, 55. Yes, you're right, Felicia.
Mindset.
Yeah, it is mindset. I thought to myself, I am not ready to be in a senior citizen group. I am not ready. I am not ready. But thank you very much.
But it's ironic that you say that, because in my observation, going back to our original statements about social media connection, staying connected to communities, the opportunity to do so thanks to social media, I have observed many of our peers, whether they directly were integrated with us in our own personal lives or not, who get to a certain stage of life and just throw up their arms and go, this is it. And I'm like, oh Jesus, I've been marinating. I'm just starting.
Yes,
like I'm just barely getting up to the start line. Like I feel like, everything that's come under my belt or in my crossroads up to this point is just preparing me for what's to become.
There you go. And that's how God has given us the grace to last this long, to our late 50s, early 60s. And hopefully we have kept our faculties so that we can recall and remember and bring bad and good experiences into a lens of wisdom, so that going forward, we can make good choices and we can appreciate life and appreciate everything that's around us. With you, it's nature. With all of us, it should be nature. But how well connected we are in relationship to the immediate surroundings. It brings so much fulfillment to our lives, and we just kind of slow down and see the beauty of everything around us. I know it sounds corny, but for me, it's true.
No, it's very earthen, no pun intended. It's very grounding. It's very key. It's very key. It's not about, it's an interesting time because, being in Hollywood and award seasons and all the idolization of, trophies and winnings and all this stuff, it brings up a lot of things for a lot of people. And it always makes me personally very reflective. This year happened to be one of those moments where, not important by the way, but what was important was seeing a bunch of individuals who had been going at it for a very long time, who in some cases had stepped away or didn't feel heard or didn't feel seen, and how they were being recognized and awarded for their good work. Was it timing? Was it good luck in the project? And a combination of all the stars aligning and, the physics in the galaxies just being in the right place, right time? I don't know. Mm-hmm. But it was a reminder that, never give up on your dreams. Your dreams are never too big. I mean, I wrote about this. I literally wrote this piece. I wrote this piece about how, goodness gracious. I wrote this piece about how, your dreams are never too big, and all of our dreams matter. There are no some that have more important dreams than the next. There is no path that is right versus wrong. We hope we make sound decisions that don't harm us or others. But that takes a consciousness, that takes decision making, that takes being put in paths and environments that are healthy, that are fruitful, that are expansive. And not all people get those, not all babies get planted in those environments to fruit those labors and those sources of to become. And some, even under all the worst of circumstances, still find their way. And some, given the golden ticket, may fall way off the cliff. Who's to say? But I do believe that, or I'd like to think that we as energy sources, which is all we really are,
Yes, I would
have
agree.
have the wherewithal over time to assess, see the patterns, go forward in a manner that was like a living, what I refer to as a living sculpture, and say, okay, when I walk in this room, now I see how the tushy needs to be, like, you know, carved out a little bit here on the left or the right. And this is a point of life that we get to make choices. We get to assess where we are. We may not have control over much other than our own mindset, other than
Yes.
our own interaction with who we choose to interact with,
And our
the timing of things. There's lots of things that we don't have control over. It could be how the person does or doesn't stop at the stop sign, how the
yes,
person does or doesn't show up to work on time, how people do or do not think that accountability is an asset and a part of their responsibility, not only to themselves, but to others. I mean, philosophically, I could go on and on. Little did I know at, you know, this stage of life that I would become much more philosophical in my collective than I would have ever thought in my late teens, early 20s, even though I was a deeply reflective human being already. But now with, you know, more decades under my belt, I see how the importance of all of that as a collective is part of what our responsibility is as human beings, as humanity. And it was interesting, I read this piece yesterday about, I think it was about Margaret Mead talking about civilization and how civilization is based upon how we show up for others. And how in the animal kingdom, as you and I know, would both know this, you know, an animal broken does not make it in the world, in the kingdom. Why?
yes,
Because the pack is going to leave them, because it's going to hurt them. They're going to be taken down by other sources. They're not going to have time to heal, to recover, to become and go on in life. It's just kind of the natural, like, way of the rhythm of the kingdom. Versus in our world, in the human world, we actually have choices, hopefully, that we can, God forbid, we have a broken femur. We can take what that need is, time, surroundings, elements, support, to heal, to get back up on our feet, and to go out back into the world and to do something bigger and better and impactful, whatever that means, showing up, doing something, you know, reflective and inspirational. But we have the time to seed our soul and go forth because nature allows for it, hopefully, if we're
yeah.
lucky.
When you talked about any energy force, it brought me to this thought process. Actually, something that I normally talk about when I'm giving tours at the African Art Museum here. I refer back to Sigmund Freud and his protege, Carl Jung. And as you know, Carl Jung was kind of like our modern day psychoanalyst. He brought in the discipline of psychoanalysis. But the reason why I mentioned that with regards to your observations about the difference between humans and other animals in the context of self-serving versus collective serving is that when Jung took a trip to Eastern Kenya and Tanzania, he noticed that the people all took care of themselves and they all had a certain prescriptive functional role as mother, father, chief, children. They all support each other based upon their strengths and also supported each other based upon others' weaknesses countered with their strengths. This concept of community is well known in many African circles as Ubuntu, which is translated roughly into humanity, or you are because I am. Now, the reason why I brought Carl Jung into this discussion is because after this trip of looking at primitive cultures, he changed the whole definition of Freud's libido from sexual energy to community energy, or what we know in, or what they know, I'm not a psychoanalyst, but
No, you're
what
good.
psychoanalysts know as collective unconsciousness. And collective unconsciousness is a real fancy way of saying that we will all take care of each other in our respective communities, because not necessarily because it's something that we want to do, but because it's our duty to do.
Yeah.
And I just find that very, very, very insightful. And with respect to, I can't speak of all communities in the United States, but in poor Black communities, we do not take care of each other the way we do. As a matter of fact, it's just the opposite. We shoot and kill each other. Not all of us, but some of us, and is normally rooted in domestic violence. And so we have to retrain our minds to say, you know, we have a duty to take care of each other. We have a duty to love each other. We have a duty to be the best that we can be for each other, for our children especially.
You know, you touched on so many rich things that like make my heart stir. First off, going back to this conversation about Carl Jung and Mead and humanity and collective consciousness and choice, that is again going back to a mindset and choice. It is a conscious choice to be civilized. It is a conscious choice to be a human being unto another, treat one as you would want to be treated, so to speak. And it's interesting also that you mentioned within community, how community does or doesn't show up for one another. And you referred to the poor Black communities, how they don't, instead they turn on each other, they remove each other with violence, and how violence, this has been a story of a topic of discussion of mine since really publicly since '98, because I unfortunately, but fortunately, way more fortunately, survived by the hands of a violent alcoholic, off and on for 5 years out here in LA in between my 2 marriages, domestic violence. And I studied with the best of the best after I came out of that, because I wanted to know how in the hell did I, Felicia Linsky, whom nobody in any of my communities could imagine me being a part of such a thing. But what the thing about domestic violence is, and what I say, is all wars, to me personally, are prohibited and allowed because of where things begin behind closed doors in one's household. It all starts from a grassroots place and then becomes this toxic wasteland out into the world and how we project. So I believe environmentally, we are generationally repeating history of violence onto one another, the closest to us, with unfortunate disregard to getting to the root problem. Why? Because the collective would rather turn their cheek and not deal with confrontation, as most people in the world do not like to be confronted with deep-rooted, like, take a look in the mirror kind of things. I, on the other hand, quite like to go deep. I like a good deep dive. Doesn't mean I want to jump off a cliff and take a deep dive. Doesn't mean that I'm like a, you know, the ultimate end all be all perfection of it. No, but I really love having those kind of conversations. It's, to me, the most important kind of conversations. It is why I personally launched this podcast, because I believe that when a conversation like this is heard, people lean in and go, wow, this is the kind of conversation I want to have. I never get to have it. I want to be that fly on the wall hearing it, because I know something great is going to come out of this. Not because you and I aren't anything but two loving human beings who happen to know each other since our teenage years, but because we have these very rich, passionate ways about us that have caused us a lot of life experience that has made our woven experiences rich in fiber and texture and color
Yes,
that we
yes,
bring to the table. So it's like a smorgasbord of the most rich, delicious foods from every part of the planet
planet, that's
that
right.
comes from called life experience.
Yes.
And and that's what we're doing here today is exchanging around the campfire through that whole experience what we see, what we experience. And I do believe we have the power for the betterment of all to heal, but we all have to make a choice to heal together.
I would agree with you. I think you hit the nail on the head, Felicia. The common denominator between both of us is this rich tapestry of life that we've had. To elaborate on that, from what I've learned from you, at least in our last conversation, is that you have traveled extensively under several unusual conditions because of the industry and profession that you serve. And I, earlier in my life, traveled probably up, by the time I was 30, I think I had traveled to over 32 countries and lived in more than 2 years, Eswatini, which was then known as Swaziland, and then Jamaica. And this is my big up. I'm celebrating on one hand St. Patrick's Day, but if you look a little closely, I'm really celebrating Jamaica.
I love it so much. I ironically nearly put on a very similar green piece. I'm like green splattered with like graffiti leggings. It's pretty great
Oh.
and fun. But you and I are aligned. I of course am hairless, so I'm covered in a cap because my head gets so cold from going through chemo. But yes, I love that you represent parts of where you've been and come from. So continue. Forgive me, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, well, that was one of my main points, but I think that we could talk a little bit about the value of traveling, the value of international experiences, and the experiences which have enriched ourselves with respect to the multiple lenses that we've had to look through to see the reality of how other people live, what they value, how they think, and what is important to them. I've seen this through 32 different lenses, probably at least up to 32 different lenses based upon the regions of the world I've traveled and the countries I've been in and the different ethnicities, different foods I've tried. And I found, looking back, the number of years, as you explained earlier, as we have decades under us, our brains are able to develop certain patterns of observation and to come to certain conclusions or at least certain level of analyses of the level of human condition of how people live and specifically how we are as Americans. I think that we have a lot to be grateful for. Most Americans don't realize this if they haven't traveled outside the country, but most of us live better than 75% of the world, even the poorest among us, and with a few exceptions. But I say all of that because it's really important for us in a world that glamorizes narcissism through these third-party mediums such as digital technology, social media platforms, that we are seduced into looking only at ourselves in relation to the world in terms of how better we are, or else conversely, how ugly we are because everybody else we're comparing ourselves to everybody else, especially women. And I'm not trying to be sexist or anything like that, but it leads, I find, especially I'm in education, so I make these observations for a living. But you look at, even though women and girls are advancing a lot more and a lot faster at a higher rate, in the areas of their formal education and starting their own businesses and going, which is very, very good. I feel badly for some of these young women because they have such a negative self-esteem about themselves because they compare themselves too much with other people who are just an illusion. And I don't want to talk badly about the Hollywood profession, but if you compare yourself to a Cardi B or you try to dress like her or Rihanna or Beyonce, and you track their lifestyles and what have you, whether it's imagined or whether it's real. It is, I don't think that those are the best models for our young girls under the age of 18, and in some cases between 19 and 30. I feel
or 50 or 70 or depending, again, depending upon the evolution.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
It concerns me. I don't place value judgment to say I dislike them, but it concerns me in terms of, what type of family units are we endorsing, and how are we supporting these young girls as the matriarchs and the child bearers and creators of life. I have a lot to say about our young men too, but I'm more concerned about our young women, simply because I think that they're following in an idolatrous fashion those whose images are conceived from somebody's mind instead of being reflected from a lifestyle that is positive and non-toxic.
Well, I would love to speak on that because I have a lot to say.
Yes,
so
I would invite you to. That's kind of like why I raised the issue.
So here I go. So being a young woman who grew up in the fashion industry, where mirrors and people were all around coming in to look good and feel good, and I was always around transformation, beautification, the arts, culturally speaking, whether I was seeing live theater, being a part of being an artist as from the time I was a little kid. One of the things that was made really, really apparent to me from the time I was very young, being a very smart kid, being an award-winning, national award-winning kid, all the things, achieving, being a leader in my class from president on, first cellist, the whole 9 yards, it always came back down to the value of how I looked. So the bottom line was it never mattered how well I achieved, how much I achieved, what I brought to the table. It all came down to, it's really too bad you don't lose weight. You're so beautiful. It's too bad. And it was such, excuse me, because I'm going to say it because it's my platform, a mind fuck. It was an absolute mind fuck. Yeah. And it was an undermining mind fuck of throwing my very confident self out the window because it sent the wrong messages. It said, no matter how much you accomplish, you're still not going to be good enough because you don't look a certain way. And growing up in the Midwest around a lot of blonde, blue-eyed haired girls, who were, and it didn't bring more value to the blonde hair, blue-eyed look. It was just that was the messages that I was being sent. So it didn't matter at 3 years old if I was the best ballerina. It didn't matter at 11 years old if I was a national award-winning artist. It didn't matter if I was a straight A student. It didn't matter if I was an extraordinary cellist. It didn't matter if I could win at anything in life, because it wasn't about the win. It was just about my ability to put my mind, make a decision, focus, and achieve. Because I've never been in competition with anybody else but myself, to show up every day since I was a little girl and be the best I could be. Now, how does this apply to a greater matter? Well, for somebody who was raised in summer girls' camps, where I lived with a bunch of young girls who were not my bloodline, come from all different backgrounds, mostly better off because their parents could send them to away camps, be it a day camp, be it a 1 week overnight camp, a 1 week overnight, 2 week, 4 week, now 8 week. I got to see and get exposed to lots of personalities,
Yeah.
and the ultimate motto was learning to live together. Well, the unfortunate thing about young women and women in general, and I just literally had this conversation, no matter how much we evolve in education, which we are leading in education, as we both know, in the sense of who's getting the higher educations, it's the women. But at the end of the day, it's still the women that carry the babies. It's still the way women who end up being the nurturers if they have, unless they've cut off that nurturing, empathetic self within themselves. It is still at the end of the day going to be their responsibility to take care of an older generation at the end of their life, most likely, not all, but most likely. There will always be the give up to get. There will always be not the straight road, but a broken road. Not because I'm saying that has to be, but because there tends to be a lot of interruption when you're talking about going from education to creating relationships to the possibility of motherhood, to the possibility of trying to rise to the top of a company or creating companies, and how are you valued on a local platform, a national platform, a worldwide platform. We can see, for no matter how much evolution and success women have created for themselves, that there's still very few CEOs and heads of companies globally that are led by women. We can see just by the pandemic alone how many successful women had to walk away from their jobs because they had to run a household, teach their children, manage all things from the home, and hopefully not lose their income, but in many cases did. Comparatively to the men, you almost can't compare. I, as a woman who has, earned a very successful living for much of my life, can tell you day in and day out, as a homeowner, as a leader of my departments, as a person who is, has a voice.
Yeah.
When I'm in a world, which I am most of the time, a man's world, and I might be footing the bill, and it could be a large bill. If I'm surrounded by men, I will be looked upon as if I wasn't even heard. And I'll be like, excuse me, who's paying for this? Excuse
Really?
me. Oh, Joe,
So let me
on my
understand.
own property. I haven't experienced this.
I understand that, but let me understand you this way. So if you're sitting at Joe's Crab Shack or
Yeah.
some exclusive restaurant, the Chop House, what have you,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you're with Southern men, and you're going to pay for the dinner, they would ignore you?
No. Let's talk about my house being painted, or I'm doing a major
okay.
project in my house, and let's, say it's costing a big chunk of change, and a man comes in who's going to provide the service, or a group of men come in who are providing service, which most of the time it is that, just because that's just how these particular jobs are.
Yes.
It will be as if my word is not heard, and yet I'm the one that worked hard to create that fund,
Oh, I see.
and I'm making the decisions,
Making the
not because
decision.
my husband isn't making decisions. I'm not discounting any of that, but I have seen where it's as if, like, my word does not matter. Just go over there. You
Sit down, be
and
quiet, and let us make the decisions for you.
and you just go, wow, did I really just witness that? And getting back to your original stuff about comparison, the whole valuing, the whole everything, being a person who got into the professional world of, after college, after pre-med, photography, film, theater, all the things that I studied. Once I got into the professional world, starting with fashion print, editorial fashion print, running my own photo studio with my first husband, working for companies like Playboy and major magazines, I was horrified and dumbfounded what I was contributing to the world of illusion, and delusion. I was horrified that, and you would have thought it would have stopped my career right then and there. But I have a love for visual arts. I am a visual artist. I am a storyteller. I wanted to make a living successfully as an artist. I always wanted to have a voice in that, whether as a performer or as a director or what have you. I learned very early on, ironically, in my first professional job in Chicago with a very big director, Michael Mann, when I was dressed on the set. And Andrea was there, actually, and he came onto the set. I don't know if I told you the story when we spoken, but he came onto the set in front of everybody after we were all dressed, ready to film, and literally walked onto the set. I was 24, and in front of everybody said, "Get the fat girl off the set."
Yes, I remember we had that conversation.
And the reason why I bring that up again is not to bring it up again because I'm stuck on that, but because people listening may not have heard this story. And the reason for my sharing that story is it brought me to such a blatantly public position of how certainly the world that I've chosen unconsciously, meaning Hollywood, has had the power levels to either do good or to not do good, depending upon who, how, when.
Yes.
And in that particular situation, what that did for me at the time was I made a decision. I was not going to put myself in that position. I was not going to give the power to anybody. Unfortunately, what it did, though, was I did give the power by no longer performing. And for those who knew me as a performer, knew that I had a talent to do that. And it was a great joy for me, but it really just made me turtle, no pun intended.
Apparently so, Felicia. I mean, that happened to you at age 24, and what you're describing was a major milestone, professional life change for yourself.
Correct.
You stopped.
Where I went behind the scenes.
Yes, from being in front of the camera to being behind the camera.
Correct. And I was barely just getting my confidence back after a series of life experiences from the time that right before you met me at Wayland at 15, when our parents had divorced. We had lost all of our businesses, and then our father died all within 5 months. That's a lot for a kid.
That's a lot. Yes. Especially as a teenage girl.
Yeah.
It's almost like a period of arrested development because all these things have happened and your mind is frozen.
Right. You're in survival mode.
Yes,
you're
exactly.
In survival mode. You're in fight or flight mode at that point. You don't even know that that's what you're in. You're just in it. You're in it or you're not. Because if you're not in it, you're dead. It's really black or white. There's no gray in between. You either fucking fight your way above the water or you give up. And I literally was led by our mother, thank God, who was heroic in that way, to lead us out of all of that and create 3 successful children.
Yes.
Hanging by her fingernails, literally.
Yes.
Here's a perfect example of an extraordinarily beautiful woman who was well educated in the 50s, getting her liberal arts degree, who no sooner left her community, her Roman Catholic Sicilian community, and married outside of her community into a Russian Romanian, or what is known as Ukrainian Romanian Jewish spouse background, completely similar and yet completely opposite, and certainly interracial considered at the time. And then tried, as I may or may not have shared with you in our private conversation, that she then, with my father, drove up to the University of Wisconsin-Madison to try to get a law degree. She was 2 years younger than Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And she was told to go home and be a mother and a wife. and yet she was qualified to go to law school.
She was qualified to enroll at Madison's Law School.
Yeah, she was qualified to be accepted, and it was the period of time of the 50s. And, you know, if we know Ruth Bader Ginsburg's story, we know that that was not an easy road for her to have achieved what she achieved from the get-go. And she, like I said, was in the same trajectory as my mom was, except it was Barbara Alinsky versus Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And so I try to give these kind of historic moments, personal and otherwise, because I find that in today's, it's interesting, in today's space and time, I think that there are many people, men and women, who forget history and the importance of history and why we don't either want to repeat history or how we want to grow from what we know and the shoulders we stand on. And going back to this whole thing of the evolution of women in education, but how far have we evolved? Well, at the bottom line, and I've said this, all we have to do is look at a bigger world platform. In the bigger world platform, women remain second-class citizens. Culturally, in most cultures, women are only there to procreate and to provide a household for one to come home to be fed, to be clothed, not because they're providing the income, but to launder, to provide, you know, give me my child's, you know, my next generation surname. Like, there are very basic elements. It's not about education. It's not about how you can become a global CEO. It's not about how you can be a visionary and an engineer to like solve problems, you know, from a world-renowned scientist to a artist, you know, playing piano around the world or whatever. No, it's about, here's your place. This is what you do. This is why we, you know, cut off your clitoris. This is why you have to be covered from head to toe in fabric. This is why you don't get opportunities to be educated. This is why, I mean, we are in contemporary times in 2023, and this shit is going on all over the world 24/7. Yes, we are lucky here in America. And to your point about traveling, I have repeatedly said this, and I will say this again here in this platform with you. You know, the last time I was out of the country, not out of the country, but out of the country for work was when I was in Morocco in 2015. And I absolutely loved being there, but it was definitely, for Morocco being the Riviera of North Africa, it still felt very much to me like a third world environment. And certainly as a woman, where I had to know how to play the game. I had to know how to honor where I was, you know, while in Rome, do as a Roman does, of course. So I always had a scarf wrapped around my neck so I could put it over my head. I was always covered from head to toe. I was always respectful. I never was alone. And I knew what territory I was playing in, but what I also knew was, in the opportunity to work with locals, you know, on my film crew, did I get to then integrate with them and have conversations with them and create connection with them. And on my very last night there, some of my peers took me to this beautiful open market, one bigger than I had, you know, seen up to that point, to go pick up like beautiful beautiful herbs and seasonings and things to bring back as gifts, all the things,
yes,
all of it. And conversation, I broached subject matters such as divorce, being gay, things that were just open questions to see what was going to be willing or not willing to be discussed. And I'm here to tell you, everything was shut down.
So
And
do you
this
have
is with
these conversations with Moroccan men or women? I'm curious.
Moroccan women,
Okay, I'm curious to hear.
contemporary Moroccan women who
Okay,
worked.
okay. And
Yeah,
so did when you mention these subjects about homosexuality or else women in careers, independent women, did they just didn't they just shut down totally?
yeah. And I don't honestly know, Joe, if it was because we're in a public environment,
Hmm.
and had it been like in a hotel
Yeah,
around a table having coffee or in somebody's home, if it would have been handled differently. But for the most part, it was like, shh, we don't talk about those things. Even though one of them was divorced, shh, we don't talk about those things. We don't talk about abortions. We don't talk about you know, what you can or can't. Like there was just like none of that. You know, don't talk about being gay. Don't talk about any of those things. And it's interesting to me because I came home that year from after that project, and I said to many of my girlfriends, and again, I may have shared this with you, I said to many of my girlfriends, you need to understand how much you need to appreciate and value the
yes,
ability for us to have open, honest conversations about very prevalent, important subject matters that we all have benefited from on the backs of others, i.e., the right to have a voice, the right to our bodies, the right to vote, the right to love who we choose to love, the right to have our own bank account, the right to have our own name, the right
right,
to buy our own property, the right to choose our own path. And then, boom, politically, as of 2016, 17, the fabric of our environment got challenged and shifted. And from that perspective, all of a sudden, it was like possibly going backwards, and the possibility of that still happening. We're seeing this right now with, God forbid, somebody, you know, needs to make a choice to terminate a pregnancy, and it could be for whatever reasons that it may be, and we may not want for that or believe in that religiously or what have you, but I'm here to talk about it openly. And again, why all subjects are not off the table, all subjects are on the table with me, because I want to openly share that at 46, when we had our last pregnancy, when I was 46 years of age, naturally pregnant, 4 months in, while being genetically tested, because all women over 35 technically should be genetically tested while carrying their child. And we have this technology available for these very reasons, not to play God, but to know you're carrying a healthy child developing in your womb. That we found out in that moment, after having a great pregnancy up to that point, that we actually had developing a child with an extra chromosome that statistically was proven that in third trimester could cause me to die along with the baby, and or right after birth the baby will die. And it was like scientifically, statistically, like proven
likely,
across the board.
yes,
And you could wish and you could pray and could hope for all the miracles on the planet and be the most religious, enlightened source and being. But at the end of the day, the decision was, as much as we wanted to be parents, and we did, and for those who know us have always thought, God, you know, these two should have been parents, such beautiful children. And did it have to be birthed through us? No, but that's was our choice and how it evolved. And in that moment, had to make a decision, because it was, do you lose both of us or do you lose one of us, or what do we do? And that is not an easy decision. And it's an extremely emotional decision. And no matter how you slice it, it's a huge loss. But the mere fact that we had the right to privately make that decision through the support and discussions of our private doctors, could we legally make that decision and not be arrested, or any of our doctors be arrested, or have to travel hundreds and hundreds or thousands and thousands of miles to have it done safely? Because even in that, you have to make sure that the woman is still safe through that whole, and again, religiously, one may not believe in all of that. But the fact is, for me personally, Joe,
Yes.
when I think about pro-life, isn't pro-life supporting life,
The
the
mother?
life that's here,
Yes.
versus what we hope to become? I just, I'm not here to be attacked. I'm not here to but I'm here to say, how have we come so far to go so far backwards? Because I'm here to tell you, Joe, if this was about men's penises and men's rights, in general, these conversations, we wouldn't spend as much time with the Supreme Court. We wouldn't spend so much time in protest. We wouldn't spend so much time, dishonoring. Because I'm not saying that we don't have issues with supporting men. I'm saying that when it came to the rights of men's bodies, men's capabilities, men's namesakes, men's opportunities to make money, and be, problem solvers and leaders. Yes, there are challenges depending upon what culture you've been born into, who you love, all those things. I'm not trying to make a blanket statement, but at the end of the day, your penis is not the thing that's being challenged. The right to your body is ultimately not the thing that is ultimately being legally challenged. And if, as much as men will love women, if you're not a woman and you're not in that challenge and you're not hearing or not being seen, and you're going through these shifts and challenges, no matter what your beliefs, I don't wish for anybody, be it my nieces, be it any of my peers, to ever be challenged by these things, because it's devastating in and of itself, let alone the legal ramifications that our country is dealing with at this time. And coming back to comparison, and coming back to how women, are lacking confidence, and coming back to, how far have we come versus we haven't. The truth of the matter is, as far as we've come, and I would love to think we've come far, it's kind of no different than whether it's Black versus white cultures and communities. We have and we haven't. We have and we haven't with women. Women are still always going, men are never going to be the people who birth, who are never going to have to take the time away from their trajected, prospective career, unless they choose not to get pregnant and have children, or whatever their relationship. And if they go through, God forbid, a divorce or a separation, how that economic hit will always affect a woman differently than a man. Always, no matter however you slice it. A woman, no matter how smart, how successful, how educated, will have greater challenges consistently making a living, consistently getting the higher earnings, consistently keeping that money rolling in. And she will also be categorically put into positions, depending upon her age and her sexuality and her physical beauty, whether it works for her or against her, no matter what that shows up looking like.
You've given me perspective. And there's so many topics that I can ask questions on. I don't know if we have enough time,
Yeah,
but
we do.
okay.
We have an hour if you
Okay,
have the
great.
time. Yeah.
I do have until for another hour.
Join me next week to hear the rest of this delicious conversation. It really is one of those conversations that I invited Joe back to do more of the same. So tune in next week where we drop the second part of this really fun way to connect and converse with somebody and have a really authentic conversation about many things that matter. So I look forward to you having a wonderful week, and tune in, share, join, subscribe, and be a part of the Camp Fifi Uncensored community, where we love gathering around the campfire and talking about everything from soup to nuts, or what we like to say, from cannolis to egg in the holes, and don't forget the s'mores. And where the spirit is young, the soul is wise, and the life stories are vast. See you next week. Bye for now.